honored to be with all of you. I have a half hour, so I'm going to stay to that. And, a homie sent me a Instagram thing or whatever you call it, like a video or something yesterday. And it's Pope Leo speaking in Spanish, and he's talking to immigrants. And the translation goes, "Dear migrants," and then he says, "I bow to your dignity," and which I think is wonderful. But I also thought it was wonderful that this homie saw that and sent it to me. So I want to begin by just saying that I bow to your dignity, and that message is what you communicate in such a privileged way in all the detention facilities that you represent here. I gave a retreat yesterday, and I have a funeral in Oxnard tomorrow. So I'm as we say in California, I'm an in-and-out burger. So, so I'm sorry to do that. I would have liked to have spent longer here. But eventually this will end, not my half hour, but your time here. And so I always think about conferences are sort of like what Martin Luther King used to say about church. It's not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from here to bow to the dignity of the men and women you're privileged to accompany. You go from here to stand at the margins, because that's the only way they'll ever get erased, is if you stand out at them. And you will go from here where you stand with people whose burdens are more than they can bear and whose dignity has been denied. That's why you bow to them, so they can remember. It's like in the church, you kind of think, David French, who is a columnist in New York Times, he says there are two kinds of churches. There's the fear the world church, and there's the love your neighbor church. And you represent the love your neighbor church, which that's the marrow of the gospel, because you stand with the demonized so that the demonizing will stop. And you stand with the disposable so that the day will come when we stop throwing people away. You represent the God of love. And once you know the God of love, you fire all the other gods. And you help people do that. And you imagine a circle of compassion, and then you imagine nobody standing outside that circle. And you will go from here to dismantle the barriers that exclude, because that's how noble your task is. Because you take seriously what Jesus took seriously, which fortunately for us are only 4 things: inclusion, nonviolence, unconditional loving kindness, and compassionate acceptance. And you represent that at the margins. And needless to say, everybody and his mother is going to accuse you of wasting your time at the margins. But the prophet Jeremiah writes, "For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing." And because of you, other voices get heard. But it's a delicate kind of ministerial presence. So I want to do something a little bit different than what I would normally do. And part of the thing, I would anticipate, a question about burnout, about how difficult it is, what you do. And this is the thing that we, all of us who are in this business together, need to turn on its head. And you don't go to the margins to make a difference, because then it's about you. But you go to the margins so that the folks at the margins make you different. And now it's about us. And that's an essential thing, I think, to recognize. I was in Houston, and I was giving a talk, and what you might call a hardcore gang intervention worker shows up after the talk, and he corners me, and he tattooed, gang member, but now he's working in the streets of Houston. And he kind of pleads with me. He says, how do you reach them? Meaning gang members. And I found myself saying, well, for starters, stop trying to reach them. Can you be reached by them? Can you allow your heart to be altered? Can you receive who they are and delight in their being? That turns the whole thing on its head. You know, I can remember years ago, a senior staff at Homeboy, so we have 500 trainees. We have 100 what we call core homies who've come through the program, our 18-month program. But because they know how to make croissants real good, we don't want them to leave. So they're training other people, homies, to make bread and stuff. And then we have 200 senior staff. So we have 800 folks who on payroll there. But it happens every once in a while. A senior staff will come and they'll just go, oh my God, I guess I'm just too compassionate. I may need to take 2 months off, you know, with pay. And and I'll say, I hate to break this to you, but you've allowed this to become about you because it's about fixing, saving, rescuing. And it's a tally sheet. It's about outcomes. How many people did you keep from whatever, getting into trouble, or you know, going back to their neighborhood, or you know, how many inmates did you get to come to services? And it can't be a tally sheet. So I remember telling this woman, I said, you've allowed it to become about you. And what happens if it's about you and you go to the margins, you know, and it's about outcomes, then that's depleting, and you will burn out, guaranteed. But if you go to the margins and allow your heart to be altered and decide to delight in the people who are right in front of you, then it's about us, and that's eternally replenishing. So I'm going to, you know, I'm 72 years old, and I realized last September on the Pope's birthday that, in fact, I'm older than the Pope, which has never happened to me in my life. I didn't think that was actually supposed to ever happen, but it did. So, but I've never had a moment like this ever. You know, we always say it's not, there's nothing kind of once and for all. It's always the same damn thing over and over again. But, you know, like I promise I'm going to pray every morning, you know, and it's like, well, wow, ever since I made that promise, I've managed to do that. No, it doesn't work that way. Nothing works that way, except this did in my life, where something altered me forever. And there was a homie named Lulu, Luis, but we all called him Lulu. And he was a gang member living in the projects in the parish where I was a pastor, the poorest parish in Los Angeles, and nestled in the middle of 2 public housing projects, the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs there at war with each other when I was pastor. And the LAPD called my parish the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in Los Angeles. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness. In 1988, I buried my 256th 2 weeks ago. Not all from that parish, obviously. So there was this kid, Lulu, who was selling crack cocaine, which is what everybody, gang members, did in those days, and then until he became his best customer. And so I said, you know, it's probably time for rehab. Oh, no, I'm okay. This went on for a while. Till finally he said, you're right. So I drove him up near Magic Mountain in Los Angeles where there was a rehab, and I deposited him there. 30 days later, I had to call him to tell him that his younger brother, Eric, had done something that gang members don't do. He put a gun to his head and ended his life. Gang members are more inclined to walk into enemy territory and hope to die. And so he was obviously devastated. And I said, well, I'm going to come pick you up for the funeral, but I'm going to drive you right back afterwards. And he goes, I want you to, because I like how recovery feels. So I go pick him up, and he gives me a big abrazo, and he gets in the car. He launches right in. He says, I had a dream last night, and you were in it. And he said that he and I are in a room, let's say this size, but there were no lights. There were no illuminated exit signs. There was no light creeping under the door. He says, I know you're there, but we're not speaking. We're in silence. Until in the silence, I reach into my pocket. I happen to have a flashlight, and I aim it steadily on the light switch on the wall, and I still don't say a word. And he knows that he's the only one who can turn the light switch on. He's grateful that I have a flashlight. And in the dream, with great trepidation, he follows the beam of light until he gets to the light switch, and he kind of sighs a huge sigh. And he flips the light switch on, and the room is flooded with light. And now he's sobbing. And he says, the light is better than the darkness. Like he didn't know this to be the case. I guess my brother never found the light switch. I'm telling you, in my 72 years of living, it's the only time in my life when something just changed forever. And I've never gone back to my previous way of living. So at that point, we were 10 years into Homeboy. And I'd ride my beach cruiser in the middle of the night in housing projects and, put that Uzi down, or sure you want to shoot that guy, and crazy making. Until he told me that dream. And I went, oh, okay, I get it. I was so close to burnout. And it was for one reason. It was about me. I was trying to make a difference. I was trying to, how many homies can you save, rescue? And I stopped forever. I've never been near burnout as I was then. I've never even been close. I've been tired, I've been exhausted, but never burned out. I've never been depleted. But I was those first 10 years. Because I didn't sleep, I'd ride my bike, I'd be in the middle of the night, it would crazy. I tell you that not because this is something you do, but I think it is a temptation. I think it's a real thing for folks who are chaplains or who are in ministry at all. You really have to kind of, speaking of light switches, it's like a light switch. You have to kind of say, I'm not going to do that anymore. Which is to say, every single one of you owns a flashlight and you know where to aim it. And boy, that has to be enough for you. And we're all tempted to go, here, hold this flashlight. I'm going to go turn that light switch on for you. No, it just doesn't work that way. It's like the mother who comes to see me. This happens all the time. Ay, padre, no hay que hacer, my son is addicted to meth. And I'll look out into the lobby. I go, where is he? Oh, he's at home in bed. I go, oh, no amount of you and me wanting your kid to go to rehab and get well will ever be the same as your kid wanting this for himself. So, dile que venga, We got him if he comes. But that's the temptation, Just as a mother in total love would do anything she could to have her kid be right, it just doesn't work that way. I hope that makes sense, because I feel like it's a key. And then all of a sudden, your life is eternally replenishing. You breathe in the spirit that delights in your being, and then you breathe it out into the world because the world could use it. You receive the tender glance from God, and then you choose to be that tender glance in the world. You notice the notice of God, and then you choose to be that notice with the people you're privileged to accompany. And then that is eternally replenishing. because you're delighting in the people who are right there. And so we go to the margins and maybe we ask ourselves, kind of what's our disposition there? What's our stance? So, I'm a Jesuit and, like Pope Francis, I'm just saying, but anyway, the homies don't know what a Jesuit is. So even though there are 3 of us who work there, and we've had many over the years come through there, and novices and scholastics and stuff. But they don't know who we are. And so I was sitting behind my desk in my office is a glass enclosed office, but I can look out I can see the front door, I can see everything, I can see the reception area. And so I'm sitting there and I have 2 homies in front of my desk and, we're talking and we have like 8 tour groups a day, groups from all over the world. And the homies give the tours. And so this tour group just appears outside of my office and it's, they just plunk themselves down there. It's like 20 people. And it's one of those observe our founder in his natural habitat kinds of moments. And the tour guide is Osvaldo. And Osvaldo has a loud-ass voice. Oh, my God. And he says, this is Father Greg Boyle. He is the founder of Homeboy Industries. He is a jiu-jitsu priest. So from my office, I do some of my more impressive moves, Anyway, I told you that to tell you this. In 1540, February 28th, St. Ignatius of Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits, enters for the first time this word in his spiritual journal, his diary. And he uses it a lot for the remaining 12 years of his life. And before he dies, he goes back and he circles the word for all the times he used it. And I know Spanish, but I didn't know this word. And the word is acatamiento. Acatamiento. And it comes from a kind of archaic word, acatar, which means to look at something with attention, which is a good description of what you do for a living. And it gets translated as affectionate awe. And certainly it was born of a singular spiritual encounter between Ignatius and the God of love. I'd like to think he wanted it to be expansive and helpful, like for you, for us. Like, what is your disposition? What is your stance at the margins? Acatamiento, affectionate awe. And it reminds me in the Acts of the Apostles, it has a similar thing where it has this one odd line where it says, and awe came upon everyone. And it seems to suggest that the measure of health in any community, including this one, could well reside in our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry rather than in judgment. To stand in affectionate awe with the men and women you're privileged to walk with. So wind it down with a story. So many years ago, I was invited to speak to 600 social workers in Richmond, Virginia. In those days, we had these things that you don't seem to have them now, but the gang thing from 88 to 98 was the decade of death, and it was all over the country. And so they would have gang in-services. So 600 social workers from in Richmond, Virginia, commandeered a hotel ballroom, and they sign in the morning, and it's from 9 to 5, and they get credits. And you hear, there are workshops and breakout sessions and keynote addresses, and I'd done a lot of these over the years. And you try to kind of help social workers understand, why does a kid join a gang, and what can you do? And you kind of help them understand that no hopeful kid has ever joined a gang in the history of the world. It's not about good kids or bad kids. No kid is seeking anything whenever he joins a gang. He's always fleeing something. I've never met an exception. And gangs are the places kids go when they have encountered their life as a misery. Everybody knows that misery loves company. And so you talk to them about how do you infuse hope to kids for whom hope is foreign? And how do you help kids transform their pain so they don't have to transmit it anymore? And how do you deliver mental health services in a timely and culturally appropriate way? Like that. So I figured I would maybe give a keynote because I'd done that at so many of these. I said yes, and I bought my plane ticket. Well, this happens, a lot, where I pull out the letter that invited me, and I guess I hadn't read the letter very carefully. I was to be the only speaker from 9 to 5 all damn day. And I said to myself what the homies often say, oh, hell no, I am not going to be the only speaker. So I called in 2 homies who were in our 18-month training program. And Andre, African-American gang member, and his enemy, Jose. And I sit the 2 of them down and I said, look, at the end of the week, you're flying with me to Richmond, Virginia. I would like you to get up in front of 600 social workers and tell your stories. Take your time. Because we got a long-ass day to fill. Well, I'd never heard their stories. Jose gets up first, and he's like 25 years old. And, shot caller, tattooed, been to prison. And, in the 18-month program, people move around. Maybe they work for 2 months in the tattoo removal clinic, which is open from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Maybe they work in one of our 17 social enterprises, bakeries and restaurants, electronic recycling, dog grooming. Maybe they align themselves with a legal department or something else. Well, Jose, who, was solid in his recovery, had became a very valued member of the substance use disorder team. And he was helping younger homies and homegirls with their addiction issues. So shot caller, gang member, felon, but he also had a long stretch as a homeless man, even longer stretch as a heroin addict. So he gets up in front of 600 social workers and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I think I was 6 when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. Well, 600 social workers audibly gasp. And then he says, it sounds way worser in Spanish, he said, and we got whiplash going back and forth because the audience did exactly what you did. And then he continued, I think I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walked me up to an orphanage and she knocked on the door and the guy came to the door and she said, I found this kid. And she left me there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of her where she had dumped me, and my grandmother came and rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine, and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I had to wear 3 t-shirts to school each day. First t-shirt, the blood would seep through. Second t-shirt, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school, they'd make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? And then he stopped speaking. And he seemed to be staring at a piece of his story that only he could see. And when he could regain his speech, he said through his tears, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. But now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. Acatamiento, affectionate awe. The measure of our compassion lies not in our service of those on the margins, but only in our willingness to see ourselves in kinship with them. And so we go to the margins in the hopes that they'll get erased, that we will imagine a circle of compassion and then imagine nobody standing outside that circle. The goal of our prayer is not union with God, because we have a self-effacing God. God hopes we will try to effect union with each other and a community of cherished belonging and a community of kinship where there is no us and them, or as Jesus says, that you may be one. And so beyond this conference, you roll up your sleeves and you want to take seriously what Jesus took seriously. And you want to live the marrow of the gospel. And my sense already of everybody here is that you gave up a long time ago caring if anybody accuses you of wasting your time at what you do. For in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. I bow to your dignity.